So, back to the random portion of it. A couple more shows finished airing, so we bumped them up here. Uh, I also decided that I am going to include these two shows here, Shine Post and Futopi, or Futopi, or whatever that's pronounced. Um, Even though they're ending like halfway through October, I think I'm gonna just start considering them to be uh what do you call it, summer season shows, because the intent was for them to be finished by the end of the summer season, I think. Not so much with Futopi, but I'm just gonna include them. But they're still not finished yet, so we're not gonna get to those for now. For now, we got like 19 shows that are finished. So let's jump over to the randomizer and see what we get from those. It's gonna be 9. Ashi. I think this is a sports anime. Let's give it a go.
Sometimes I wonder why it is that sports anime basically get guaranteed a 2 core season when so much of the rest of the anime coming out can barely get one. And do they just sell that much better? Does the manga just sell that much better? Is it because of a demographic? I'm just curious as to why it is, because for some reason, like, the proportion of sports anime coming out, like modern sports anime coming out, that are 2 core seems significantly higher than every other genre. In any case, I watched about half of the first episode of Ashi. It's fine. It's totally average. I don't feel any particular attachment to anything. That's why I didn't bother finishing the first episode. It's just super plain, middle-of-the-road sports series from what I've seen of it. As a little fun fact, I guess, I actually did play soccer for a little while. Actually, no, not a little while. I think at least 5 years, I guess, when I was younger. 5 or 6 years. So, I am pretty, at least at an entry level, I'm pretty familiar with the sport. So, I always look forward to soccer anime being good, and then always end up being disappointed when they're painfully mid. This isn't painfully mid. This is, like, if I finished this one, I could see myself giving it like a 5 or a 6. Obviously, there's like 23 other episodes to come after this, so it might get really good later. But I just don't have the time to invest in something like this when I just don't really feel anything from the first episode. I do have 2 notes, though, on why I don't feel anything in particular. Is one, it feels like the story is starting in a weird spot. Like, the setup for this is cocky, overconfident forward who has been on a bunch of teams in the past that all rejected him because he's a ball hog, but then at the very start of this episode, he's like already well established on a team that actually cares about him and wants him to succeed, and just passes the ball to him with no reservations. But this is like his last game with this team, apparently, because like it's the end of junior high and he's going into high school. Feels like we skipped a lot of steps. Like, I would have much rather seen like a montage of those other teams and then seen him like slowly get to know this team better. It's a little bit more cliche, I guess, that way, but it at least would establish the character better, because the way that the show actually establishes the character is to have someone from his past who is on the opposite team just give a character summary of him for like 30 seconds and then insult his team in order to get him to attack him and get him thrown out of the game. And then the second issue, which is like that scene in particular. Now, the way that the scene is originally structured is the opposing player insults his team, and then it cuts to like him headbutting, to our main character headbutting him. So the implication there is that insulting his team is what got him riled up. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's that's interesting. Like he actually does care about this team that accepts him for his ball hogginess. Again, I would have liked to see that growth over time, or just more interactions with that team, but it's something. But then later on in the episode, it's like apparently part of that conversation was cut out where the opposing player insulted the MC's mother, and that was what set him off, which is just less interesting. Like, it still makes sense, but it's less interesting. So, yeah, I'm not really feeling this main character. There's been a pretty strong rash of super cocky, overconfident main characters in sports anime lately. Like, we just had Goal to the Future this season as well. This guy is significantly less annoying than that main character, but I still don't particularly care for him. Also, there was this scene really early in the episode where they refer to the MC as the guy with the weird hair, and it's just like slightly unkempt, medium-length hair, like most soccer protagonists. It's not that weird. Like, even not counting anime standards, it's not that weird a hair. So I was just like, that's a very weird comment to make. Yeah, I'm not particularly feeling this one. Apparently this one has been really well received, I guess. Like, it's got a pretty decently high score on Mail, and I know a lot of the people that I follow like it. I just don't feel it, so I'm not going to sink a ton of time into it.
Alright. Ashi comes off the list. Let's see what we get next. It is 8. Engage Kiss. This one looked pretty fun. Let's give it a go.
One of these days I'm going to learn to not let my hype be dictated by my dick, but sadly today was not the day. I watched about 2.5 episodes of Engage Kiss. It's just a pretty mediocre action series. Mostly what I liked about it from what I saw so far is the fan service. Like, it's got some pretty decent fan service, not gonna lie. Like, the workout scene in episode 2, fucking hot. And the kiss scene in episode 1, pretty hot. But there's so much bullshit around all of that it's just kind of drags down the experience into mediocrity. Like, the main character is just so not good. He's kind of a scumbag. Well, no, he definitely is a scumbag. Like, it's so incredibly obvious that the two girls in the series are into him, and he kind of uses that knowledge to his advantage, like to take advantage of them for stuff that he needs done. But he never, but he very much, I'm not going to say he doesn't seem interested in romancing either of them, but he just doesn't put in the effort for it. It seems like, especially with Kisara, the pink-haired one, it seems like a fucking pain for him to have to deal with her sometimes. And it's just so... Why? Like, why write that? I don't get it. Why? Like, you've got this scumbag MC with girls tripping over themselves to get his dick, and he just couldn't fucking care less. Like, I hate him. I don't like this guy. And aside from that, the story is nothing. It's just a generic supernatural action series setting. Vague hints of corporate government cover-up stuff, but it kind of just tells you that that stuff's happening and doesn't really explain how that affects the setting or the characters in any meaningful way. So it's just kind of useless information. Most of the side characters are either nothing or annoying. I don't think there's a single character in this show that I actually like, except for Kisara because yandere. Yeah, this one kind of is not good. Let's move on.
Alright. Engage Kiss coming off the list. Disappointing. Let's move on. Crank down the number generator and see what we get. 5. 5 is Phantom of the Idol. I have no idea what this is. I'm assuming it's an idol show. Let's see if I'm right.
Lately, I've been coming across a lot more shows where I just watch it and I'm like, yep, that is a show that exists. And that is Phantom of the Idol, which I watched about half an episode of. Painfully mediocre on all fronts. Not really funny at all, despite all of the jokes that it had. This is one of those anime where the joke is this them shouting obvious, slightly surprising or slightly out of the ordinary things. So not really jokes at all. It's not funny. The animation is just completely flat and unambitious in all fronts. It's just kind of there. And the characters are fine. It's about a dead idol who possesses a living idol who hates his job. I could see some gender bend stuff, gender comedy popping up at some point, since the ghost is a girl idol and the guy who's alive is a boy idol. But I don't care. I'm not even. I can't even make the effort to be angry at this show for being mediocre. It is just so nothing that we just need to move on.
Okay, Phantom of the Idol was off the list. Let's see what we roll next. It is 5 again. Tokyo Mew Mew New. Okay. Magical Girl show and also a remake. Let's see how it do.
The fact that I made it more than one episode into this show tells me that I am completely starved for Magical Girl content and I desperately need more good Magical Girl shows to watch. So yeah, I made it about 3.5 episodes into Tokyo Mew Mew New. It's actually not awful despite that introduction I just gave. There are definitely awful things about it, but on the whole, it's just kind of average. And yeah, I guess the fact that it gets the magical girl part right, sort of, is probably what got me as far into this show as I did. Because I just inherently like the concept of magical girls. I like the positivity. I like the creativity. In terms of magical girls, the premise for this one is pretty creative. The idea of centering it around endangered species is kind of unique. Not sure if they're going to do a whole lot with it outside of like the first 2 episodes, because they kind of dropped that real quick. But yeah, I like the aesthetic of it. I never saw the original series. I did not see the original, which I think was Studio Piero, I think. I'm not entirely sure. I could just be pulling that out of my ass. And I'm not even sure why I'm mentioning it, because I don't even know which studio this is that's doing it. But it actually doesn't look awful. Like, there's actually a decent amount of cinematic ambition in this remake. So, it's not amazing, and there's a lot of it that does kind of look like shit. But I can see effort on display here, which is a lot more than I can say about most anime remakes. Like, if we compare this to something like... I get shit on this for saying it all the time, but I'm not backing down from this. I think the new Fruits Basket anime looks like garbage. It is unambitious in its cinematography and just generally not polished enough to make me think that it looks good. And I would put this show above that. It at least tries. So, there's that. I actually don't mind most of the characters when they're... there's this fucking racket going outside my goddamn window, but I'm just gonna power through it. On the whole, I do kind of like... I like the concept of the characters. Like, I like the vibe that a lot of them are putting off. I like the little monkey girl. I like Ichigo. Mint has got this cuteness to her, this kind of snarky cuteness, not snarky, but sneaky. I don't know. I like them. I like the cast. Not a huge fan of Lettuce. Mostly because her episode was extremely rushed, and that's one of the big problems overall with the series is it's very clearly rushing through content, because I think this is also one of the few big Magical Girl franchises that isn't anime original. I believe this one actually is based on a manga, which was written by Yoshida Reiko, I believe. Or Reiko Yoshida, I think. She was like a big KyoAni writer. She did K-On! And stuff like that. So, I actually read the first couple chapters of the manga, and I fucking hated it. So, I'm surprised that I like the anime as much as it is. I could also just be pulling that out of my ass, too. Maybe it was a multimedia franchise, and they launched together. But who knows? I'm fairly sure that the manga came first, though. But yeah, I would definitely be interested in checking out the original series, just based on what I've seen here, because I think it does have potential to be good. Despite some of the elements that I'm not super excited about, like, don't need this fucking love triangle bullshit. Don't need it, especially... Maybe it's a little better in the original because it's not rushed and the characters are a little bit more developed. Because, again, it's just super rushed here. But, honestly, one of the biggest things that's making me drop this show is the voice acting. Like, a lot of the voice acting, and I'm talking about the Japanese voice acting, a lot of the voice acting in this remake is fucking dog shit. It is bad. Like, especially Ichigo and Pudding. Or Buling, I guess, as she is in the sub. I'm pretty sure it's... Is it supposed to be Pudding? I thought it was supposed to be Pudding. That would keep with the food names for the characters. But anyway, those two in particular, really bad voice acting. And as I suspected, I looked it up. All of the main character magical girls in this show are brand new voice actresses who may or may not be part of a new idol group that was formed along with this show as again multimedia projects and stuff. But yeah, I'm surprised that they didn't go back and get the original voice actresses, because that's normally what happens with remakes. Not all the time, but that is normally, maybe they've definitely aged out of the roles since it's been like 20 years, I guess. But normally they like go back and like try to get the old cast for these kind of stuff. Again, they're probably aged out of the roles, but I think getting fresh voice actresses for this was probably a mistake because they just don't sound good. They don't. And perhaps the voice director's not doing his best to help them along in that capacity either. But it makes a lot of this show unlistenable. So, yeah, I might check out the original series at some point. I don't know how long. Is it like it's either 2 core or 4 core? I can't remember, but I might check it out at some point. I just need to watch more Magical Girls in general too. There is at least one other Magical Girl show in this season, or that's ending this season. Hopefully it's good. I only know about one other person on Twitter who's watching it, but we'll get to that when we get to that. But for now, Tokyo Mew Mew new, kind of a dud.
Alright. Mew Mew, gone. Let's see what we get next. It is going to be 15. Oh, look at that. It's the other Magical Girl show. Waccha PriMagi. Hopefully it's good.
Man, I just keep striking out with Magical Girl series. This is becoming an issue because I theoretically like Magical Girl series. But anyway, I watched about a little over 3 episodes of Waccha PriMagi. I like this one more than Tokyo Mew Mew new. Obviously not enough to finish it, but what I think this one definitely is even better at capturing like the emotions of the magical girl idea, this hopefulness, this optimism, and all that. And also, I think it's a lot more fun than Tokyo Mew Mew new. Just the general like excitability of the characters and the comedy, I think, is a lot stronger. Like underrated trope, quirky magical being from another realm, dimension, whatever, comes to our world and just railroads this Genki girl MC into doing whatever she wants. Underrated trope. I like that, and I kind of like the dynamic between Matsuri and Miyamu. I think it's the way that they interact is pretty cool, and just in general, I really like the character interactions in this show, which generally I think is probably the most important part of a Magical Girl series, at least in terms of what I like from these kind of shows, is how these characters interact, how these characters develop, how their interactions cause them to develop and grow and progress and all of that. And I think there's a lot of good setup for that in this series, which is not surprising once I started digging into the staff behind this series, and the person on series comp, I forgot what her name is, Fumi something, but she was the writer for Hugto Precure, which is probably one of the most critically acclaimed Precure series of the past decade. And I definitely agree with that assessment. I really like Hugto. And knowing that, like, I do see kind of her imprints on this series as well. So, at least on the character front, it's pretty well written. And one of the chief directors for this series is Junichi Sato, who is like a big Magical Girl guy. He was on, again, Hugto Precure, but he was also on Sailor Moon. He tagged up with Ikuhara a couple times on some stuff, I think. Big name director. So staff-wise, this series should have gotten me pretty excited. And again, the characters, really strong. The way they interact, really strong. What throws me off about this series is I have no fucking idea what's going on. I honestly don't. I don't know what's happening like 30% of the time in this series. I'm over 3 episodes in, and I still have no clue how any of this shit works. It's baffling to me. Like, there is zero explanation for how the magic in this world works. Why there is magic collection. The magic, I guess, is known as Waccha, or that's like the energy form that magic takes in this world, I guess. I have no idea what that is or what it represents. I have no idea why it's being collected. Like, what the purpose of it is. I assume that might be explained later in, like, an evil villain sense, because there is an evil organization in this series. They haven't outed themselves as an evil organization yet, but they're called the Omega Corporation, so obviously evil. I'm not saying that in, like, a critical way. I mean, it's a fucking magical girl show, of course. But I have no idea how this magic works. I have no idea why this magic works. Even more confusingly, like, the setup for this show, in the first episode, in all of these episodes, it constantly contradicts itself on whether people at large are supposed to know that magic exists in this world. It just constantly seems to go back and forth on this stuff. Like, my initial impression when Miyamu and Matsuri first meet is that, no, normal people don't know that magic exists. But then, once the first episode, like, gets going and she starts, like, registering for the PriMagi shows and stuff, it seems like oh, there are a lot of people in this world that know that magic exists. So it's like, okay, so was that just a fluke? But then later it's like a character comes in, is like, don't let anyone else know that you guys can use magic. But I was like, wait, you just showed off magic to an entire crowd of people. Like, what? Why? So that's immensely confusing. I also don't know why this PriMagi thing exists, other than that it's a competition, and that they leave it at that. There is so much unexplained in this show, which is kind of shocking for a kids series. So I just don't get what is going on. I am baffled. I am confused by the world building in this series. And it just becomes so draining on the overall experience for me. Which is a shame because, again, the characters are really solid. Animation's not bad either. It's not incredible, but it's got a good design sense. I like the character designs. It's not horribly animated except for, like, the Toma, who's, like, the one guy kid in the series. Like, I would say that he's constantly off-model, but the fact that he is off-model 100% of the time makes me think that his model wasn't good to begin with. So, I don't know what to do with that information. And the music is fine, because this is basically like a Precure meets Idol or Love Live thing. But it doesn't really have the best of either of those. They're not fighting anybody at this point. So, it doesn't have the hype of, like, fighting with magic, but the performances aren't particularly good either. They're okay, but they're not good. Again, is it fair to compare brand new Magical Girl franchise to fucking Love Live? No, that's not fair, but it's the only comparison I've got. So, by that metric, it's not particularly good. Like, Yayoi's performance in episode 3, I was watching it, and my brain was breaking because some of the dance sequences were not properly timed to the music. Like the animation was too fast for the music, and it was hurting me as a musician to watch this. So yeah, it doesn't really do that element particularly well either. And also something about Yayoi's song was fine, but I think for Matsuri's song, like the mixing is just not good, or the song just isn't well built. The instrumentation for that song just isn't good, because it felt very hollow during the verse for her song. I really wanted to like this show, especially because the characters are so damn good. If that's what you're looking for in a Magical Girl series, watch this show. You will find yourself having a grand old time. It's just a shame that everything else wasn't even close.
Alright, unfortunately, PriMagi has to come off the list. I believe it's time to jump down to our little bottom section here. And it's time for Call of the Night. I'm like 9 volumes into the manga at this point, so I'm really excited for this. Let's fucking go.
Alright, I just watched all of Call of the Night. Had a damn good fun time with that one. As I just said a little earlier, I'm pretty deep into the manga with this one. I've not been reading the scans. I only read manga physically, so I'm as far into it as the physical releases are, which I think is about 9 volumes. So having a real fun time with this one, and I would say that this is the anime is a pretty faithful adaptation in terms of like capturing the soul of the manga and what it's about, while also being an anime and allowing for it to express itself in this specific medium. One of the more obvious ways it does that is with the color design, which is very vibrant, almost too vibrant in a sense. I think overall, I think it was a great choice to portray the night in such a vibrant, technicolor way that's just explosive to look at all the time. But it just ever so slightly, it sometimes is just a little too much on the eyes. Can be a little too garish sometimes. But on the whole, I think it was a great decision to do that. And it's another sort of side consequence of that is the character designs and like the character models don't always fit with these very illustrative backgrounds. They don't always quite match in terms of lighting and stuff like that. Although I did notice that it got better with that as the series went on. So I guess they decided to like be a little more consistent with the lighting of the character models, I guess. But yeah, overall the show looks great, which I did not expect from, I think this is Leiden Films, I think. They're not a studio I expect a ton of great looking stuff from. But man, they pulled it off. Fucking great character designs. The few action scenes that this show has looked phenomenal. The character acting was really great. Some of the more like artsy moments where it starts to get more ambitious with how, and a little more like out there with how it portrays the character designs and like the line work and all that was really good. The like vampire attack scene in like episode 11, I think it is, what in particular was really good, and just the color design in general for that episode was so fucking incredible. Yeah, this is a fucking great looking show, and it's probably one of the sexiest shows I've seen all year. Like, that's another thing about the manga is that it is erotic in a very, like, it's not extremely ecchi. Like, I would say this borders on being an ecchi anime, but I would not call it that. Because that's not really the focus of it. It just has erotic moments in it, and those moments are very sexy. I think the manga is just ever so slightly better at it, but the anime really pulls it off a lot of the time too. My only most of my complaints about this show are very minor nitpicks, and I guess my minor nitpick for this is like sometimes it like cuts away from the moments a little too soon. Um, but overall, this is a very attractive looking show. Um, but it's not all just style with this one. This is actually a surprisingly deep show from the guy who wrote the Dakashi Kashi, the candy anime from like God, what was that, like 6 years ago now? Jesus Christ. Might have actually been more than that, I'm not sure. It's been so long. But yeah, this is the same author as that one, and I was not a big fan of the Kashi. I just didn't find it very funny or interesting. But this one, love the writing for this one a lot more. I think it's generally a lot funnier than the Kashi. The and just the characters in general are a lot more likable. Still just as neurotic in a lot of ways. Often more neurotic, especially because we got all these fucking crazy vampire people. But I think the nuances of it, the specifics of it, are a lot more fine-tuned in this one. I love everyone on this cast. There's not a single character in this show that I dislike. And just the way that they interact, be it human and human, vampire and vampire, human and vampire, they all have these very different, very interesting interactions with each other, and it makes this world feel very cohesive and very intricate in how these people interact with each other. And that definitely goes a long way in helping along with the themes of the series as well, which it has a surprising amount of. Most notably, it has this idea of like focusing in on what exactly love is, because like the premise of this show is our protagonist Ko meets a vampire, Nazuna. But the way that vampires turn humans into other vampires in this show is that the humans have to fall in love with the vampire, and then the vampire sucks their blood. And so Ko makes it his duty to fall in love with Nazuna so that she can turn him. And it has some pretty just generally interesting ideas on what love is, what friendship is, how relationships work with each other, with amongst different people. Like, especially the friendship thing. Like, there's a lot of there were a couple moments earlier in the series where it was like Ko was like, I didn't really have any friends, and then a bunch of like his former friends come out of the woodworks and be like, hey buddy, what's up? And it's just the realization of like, oh, I guess I did have friends, I just didn't understand that was the relationship that I had. It's a lot like I think it's episode 10 of A Place Further Than the Universe. Episode 10. With Yuzuki, who's easily my favorite character from the show. I did a whole video about that way back, so if you want to go look on the main channel for that, you can. That part definitely struck a chord with me, and just the general idea of like what exactly defines love, I guess. We haven't really fully answered that question yet, because Ko still hasn't fallen in love with Nazuna by the end of the season, or even by the point that I've gotten to in the manga. But it does have these very interesting conversations about it, and just generally the conversations across the board are very interesting, and just the way that it dives into these characters and the psychology of these characters and how they interact in this multi-species society is really interesting. I think that's pretty much like the biggest appeal of this show in general. just again, just really solid characters interacting with each other and exploring these kinds of themes in really interesting ways. And just the general vampire society, quote unquote, is pretty interesting as well, in that it's just so fluid and not structured, I guess. Like, there is no real structure to the vampire world that they have. It's just a collective of vampires that just kind of hang out with each other and have, like, these oral rules on how they should operate, I guess. And the consequences for breaking those rules are pretty interesting, and with the shit that Nazuna ends up getting herself into because of her very weird relationship with Ko. I guess the one thing I should at least acknowledge is that for as fun as this show is and as cool as the characters are, the premise is admittedly problematic. I mean, I forgot exactly how old Nazuna is, but she is several decades old at this point. And Ko is 14. And so she's just going ahead and letting him fall in love with her. And they do kiss several times in this series, which is another thing that puts this a step above a lot of romance anime. I don't even know if I would define this roughly as a romance. I would not put romance I would not plaster this series with the idea of like, yeah, I'm going to recommend this as a romance anime. Like, it does have romance elements in it, but I don't think that's the super main thrust of the series, just because it's got so many ideas that it explores all at once. But anyway, it is problematic. I'm not really sure what to do with that information because the show is just so incredibly fun to watch. But, like, it doesn't even do she looks like a child, but she's actually 500 years old. No, it's just a 14-year-old human boy making out with a adult vampire. I believe. I'm pretty sure. I don't exactly remember what Nazuna's age is. Especially because there's backstory in the manga that is not explored in the anime yet that I'm not going to spoil you on. But for the time being, as the anime puts it, this is a very problematic relationship. So do with that what you will. But overall, I had a damn blast with this show. It is a fun fucking time. Would highly recommend it. I expect this to place pretty highly on my list when I go over and rate it right about now.
Alright, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out the exact placement for this one, and I think we're going to put it all the way up here, just above Dress Up Darling, and you get a decent 8. So far, Call of the Night is in the top 5 for the year. Good fucking show.